Detective Inspector Mortlock, as a result of information received, did you on the 4th of June of this year go to an address at Fulchester Bay?
Yes, sir. I visited the home of the accused, Emma Joan Lakeland.
What was the address?
3 Bay Approach, Fulchester Bay.
And what took place?
I was accompanied by 2 other officers, Detective Sergeant Curry and Detective Constable Longmore. The accused opened the door. I asked her whether she was Emma Lakeland. She replied that she was. And then I said I had reason to believe there was an alien in the house who had entered the country without authorization.
And did you name the alien?
Yes, his name was Gregori Petro.
And did she answer?
Yes, sir. She said she was the only person in the house.
Then what?
Well, I asked her if I could search the house.
And did she agree?
No, sir. She said it was inconvenient. I then showed her our search warrant, whereupon she tried to shut the door.
She tried to shut the door?
Yes, sir. We prevented that, sir, and gained entry to the house. We then began to search the premises.
Did the accused acquiesce in the search?
Well, I don't think it was acquiescence. No, sir. She followed us around, calling out abuse.
What kind of abuse, exactly, Inspector?
Just names, sir. Insults.
Is there any names that you remember in particular?
Filthy fascist pigs, I think she called us at one stage.
And was Miss Lakeland alone in number 3 Bay Approach on the 4th of June, Inspector?
No, sir. At first, of course, it looked rather like it. There was nobody else, obviously, in the rooms of the house. And then we were just wondering where to look next when I suddenly noticed a trap door that I hadn't noticed before, giving access to a loft from the ceiling of the upstairs hall.
And did you enter this loft, Inspector?
I did, sir.
What did you find?
A hideaway, sir. Set up with a camp bed, food, reading matter, and a man, sir. I asked Curry to get Miss Lakeland. When she came, I asked the man who he was. He made no reply. I said, "You're Gregori Petro, aren't you?" And he then replied, "At your service."
Did Miss Lakeland say anything at this point?
No.
What then?
I said, "I have reason to believe that you entered the country illegally. You did not enter through any port or airport, and your presence in this country is unauthorized."
Did he reply?
Yes, sir. He said, "How did you find me?"
Did you tell him?
Yes, the French police found the car he'd stolen to get away from Paris. It was abandoned by the sea in Normandy.
But he did not dispute your assertion that he was an illegal entrant.
No, sir. Nor did the accused.
Now, when you removed Petrov from the loft, Inspector, what happened?
Miss Lakeland tried to prevent us taking him away, sir.
How did she try to prevent you exactly? By force?
No, sir. She simply increased her abuse. As the duty officers got Petrov down from the trap, she started shouting to the effect that we were evil men and what we were doing was wicked.
Yes, but can you tell us her exact words?
She used the words, "It's wicked to separate us. You're evil men. I've been through too much for him."
It's wicked to separate us. You're evil men. I've been through too much for him. Did you, in fact, separate them?
No, sir. I wanted to ask them both a few more questions. We went down into the hall, sir. And then Petrov asked what we would do with him. Sergeant Curry told him that we wouldn't do anything with him except send him back to France.
For what purpose, Inspector?
Well, the French police wanted him in connection with an attempted hijacking by terrorists of an airliner in Marseille the previous January.
Did either of them say anything at that point?
No, sir. They just looked at each other.
The accused did not show any signs of being surprised?
No, sir. I ordered Petrov into custody and then turned my attention towards Miss Lakeland. To begin with, I inquired if there were any other people in the house.
And were there?
No, Miss Lakeland said that only her father and herself lived in the house, her mother having died some years previously. She said her father was away on a business trip and that she herself had just returned from Paris 3 days before.
3 days. That would have been on June the 1st.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I also asked her whether her father knew Petrov was there, and she said he did not.
Did Miss Lakeland say why she'd been in Paris, Inspector?
Oh, she's a student, sir. History and political philosophy, I believe she said. She was doing a postgraduate year at the Sorbonne.
Yes, I see. Carry on, please.
Well, at this point, I cautioned Miss Lakeland, informing her that charges could be brought against her in the matter of Gregori Petrov. She at once protested her innocence, saying that after she returned home on June the 1st, Petrov had simply turned up on her doorstep, demanding she hide him. He threatened violence if she didn't oblige.
Did Miss Lakeland tell you whether she'd known Petrov before he turned up on her doorstep?
Yes, sir. She said that she'd met him in Paris at a political discussion group that she was connected with called Liberté aux gens humains.
Ah, now, for the benefit of the court, Inspector, perhaps you could give us the English rendering of that.
Well, literally translated, it means liberty to human peoples.
Yes, thank you, Inspector. Please continue.
Well, Miss Lakeland further said that in late May, Petrov had come to her saying that for various reasons he might shortly wish to vanish from France, and putting it to her that she hide him out in Britain. She claimed she refused point blank, which angered him. But then, when Miss Lakeland left for home at the beginning of June, he simply followed her and forced her to do what he wanted.
Did you suggest to Miss Lakeland that she might wish to make a statement?
I did, sir. I did, sir.
She complied, did she?
No, sir, she declined to do so.
So, Inspector, was this the end of the investigation for you?
No, sir.
No, what did you do then?
Number 3 Bay Approach, like the other houses in that locality, faces onto the sea at the rear. Each house has its own private stretch of bay. Now, at the bottom of the garden of number 3, I found a boat shed, and inside it, a 12-foot power launch. When I first questioned her about this, Miss Lakeland said the craft belonged to her father, though she very often used it herself. I then asked her if she had used it since her return from Paris on June the 1st.
What did she reply?
She said she hadn't.
Did you have occasion to ask her again about the boat?
Yes, sir. A couple of days later, after some inquiries, I saw her at 6 p.m. on the 6th of June at the police station. I told her that I understood from one of the neighbours, a Mr. Charles Duxbury...
Yes, do you object to this? Mr. Lotterby.
No, my lord. A conditional witness order was made in his case.
Mr. Charles Duxbury had seen her in the boat on the evening of the 1st of June. He saw her going out to sea at about 5 p.m. and then heading back towards land at about 7 p.m.
What did she say?
Nothing.
Well, she'd been cautioned. She had a right to say nothing.
Yes, my lord.
Yes.
Did you discover anything else on your visit to the boathouse?
Not personally, no, sir, but
yes. Well, really, we can't hear this.
My lord, this evidence is not disputed.
Oh, very well.
I called in laboratory technicians and ordered a thorough examination of the craft in the boat shed. In the event, a tiny scrap of material was found in a corner of the cabin well forward. Now, this matched identically with a tear which was then found to have occurred in the shirt that Gregori Petrov was wearing at the time of his arrest.
Yes. Do you produce the shirt, the scrap of material, and laboratory report?
Yes, these are they.
Well, the shirt can be Exhibit 1, the piece of material, Exhibit 2. The report can be an exhibit as well, I imagine, can't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, yes.
Did you confront Miss Lakeland or Gregori Petrov with this discovery, Inspector?
Yes, sir. Together on the 8th of June. Petrov said nothing. Miss Lakeland said it must be a mistake.
Yeah. Thank you, Inspector. No further questions.
Inspector, the fact that that scrap of material was found in the Lakeland's boat merely indicates that Gregori Petrov must have been aboard the vessel at some stage, not that he necessarily made a sea voyage in it.
Well, people don't usually board boats unless it's for the purpose of travelling on water, sir.
Well, that is merely your opinion, Inspector. The defense fully accepts the laboratory report and will not be questioning it, but I am bound to say that the material establishes only that Gregori Petrov must have been aboard the boat at some stage. He may merely have been examining it to see if it was the sort of vessel that could be used in a getaway.
Oh, yes, that's one way of looking at the facts, no doubt. But you forget that Miss Lakeland was seen to take the craft to sea for a couple of hours on June the 1st and subsequently denied it.
Aberration, Inspector? Forgetfulness? Inspector, would you agree with me that it is inconceivable that Miss Lakeland could have travelled to France and back in that boat, a 12-footer?
Well, of course. Our theory is that Petrov was probably dropped from a larger craft of some kind in deep water, and then Miss Lakeland brought him ashore.
Oh, I see. According to your theory, 2 hours would have been time enough for that exercise. But then a trip of 2 hours is equally consistent with a sail on a pleasant evening, isn't it? Mr. Duxbury didn't suggest there was anyone in the boat with Miss Lakeland, did he?
Well, obviously, Mr. Duxbury...
Anybody with her, Inspector, or Miss Lakeland alone?
Miss Lakeland alone.
Thank you, Inspector. Now, what was the information which led you to the house on June the 4th?
A telephone call. At about 4 p.m. on June the 4th, we had this phone call at our Fulchester West office. It told us that if we went at once to number 3 Bay Approach, which is the residence of the accused, we would find Gregori Petro.
Just a minute. Who was your caller, Inspector?
I'm afraid I can't answer that, my lord. Despite requests, he refused to give his name.
Well, Inspector, let's now come to that part of your evidence which may tell us something of Miss Lakeland's state of mind on June the 4th, shall we? Abusive, insulting, referring to you and your colleagues as filthy fascist pigs. Did that strike you as altogether normal behavior in a woman of Miss Lakeland's obvious intelligence and background?
The whole point is she didn't want us to search the house and didn't want us to find Petrov. It's obvious.
That extraordinary remark, so carefully noted down by counsel for the prosecution. It's wicked to separate us. You're evil men. I've been through too much for him.
Well, there's where she gave herself away completely. She'd done a lot for Petrov, and we were making it all pointless.
Yet a moment later, she was claiming that Petrov had terrorized her into concealing him.
A few minutes later, yes, sir.
I suppose you would say this claim of hers was fake.
Yes, sir.
You're saying that 1 minute she's making the most unguarded statements, and the next minute she's telling a calculated lie.
Yes, sir.
Didn't that strike you as odd behavior?
No, sir.
In a moment, Inspector, you'll be telling us that Emma Lakeland did not appear to be in utterly confused, near hysterical state of mind on June the 4th.
Well, she didn't. Why should you say that? Miss Lakeland was simply... Well,
Inspector? A girl shouting pointless insults, contradicting herself, denying movements that if she'd been even half-thinking she'd have realized neighbors could corroborate. Isn't that the irrational behavior of a girl deeply shocked and disturbed, indeed terrified out of her wits?
What is your religion?
Roman Catholic.
Take the Bible in your right hand and read aloud the words on this card.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
You are Solange Marak, and you live at 116 Rue d'Abbé, Paris 12?
That is correct, yes.
Are you also a student at the Sorbonne University?
Yes, I'm a graduate in modern languages.
Miss Marak, will you tell us if you're acquainted with the accused in this case, Emma Lakeland?
Yes,
How long have you known her?
about a year and a half. We met soon after she entered the Sorbonne.
You were friends?
At first we were. But then last April something happened to make a difference to that.
What happened precisely, Miss Marak?
Emma became close to a man I disliked. Someone I thought dangerous and evil. His name was Gregori Petrov. The truth is, Emma became his mistress.
How do you know this, Miss Marak?
Emma told me. Once when we met about then, April the 20th, I think it was. April the 21st.
And what was your reaction to this news?
Well, I was shocked, horrified.
Why was that?
2 weeks before, it happened that Emma and I had met Petrov together. It was at a meeting of a political discussion group we both belonged to. Liberté aux gens humains.
Yes. Miss Marak, what sort of a group is this Liberté aux gens humains exactly? What is its purpose?
The group works for freedom, sir. For all peoples everywhere in the world. Whoever they may be, whatever their race or color.
Commendable. Would you say that it is a left-wing group, or a right-wing group, or a centrist group, whatever that may mean?
Nothing like that. We are not political. We simply wish to serve liberty for all peoples everywhere, by whatever means it may be achieved.
Yes. Yes, I see. Yes, Mr. Harveston.
Yes, you were saying, Miss Marak, that together with Miss Lakeland, you met Gregori Petrov at a meeting of Liberté aux gens humains in April?
Yes. Petrov was interested in Emma that night. I could see that. He kept trying to get her to himself. Once, when they were talking privately, I went over. Petrov was saying, "Do you believe what I say? That I am a terrorist?" I told him not to keep asking her questions, but to tell her the truth we all wanted to know, whether he was simply a Russian émigré as he had made out, or something else, whether he was an international coordinator.
Oh, now, Miss Marak, what does that expression, international coordinator, mean exactly?
Well, terrorist groups, you know, they have to act secretly.
Yeah.
So they have people to establish contacts between them around the world. These people are called international coordinators.
You seem to be very well informed about these things.
No, sir, not really. One simply knows what one hears.
Yeah.
Miss Marak, did Petrov reply to your question?
He turned it away. He said, "I know what I am, and Emma knows too, and she doesn't care."
He said, "I know what I am, Emma knows too, and she doesn't care." Did Miss Lakeland make any comment on that remark?
No. She just laughed. So you can see why I was troubled when she told me that she'd entered into an affair with Petrov.
Yes, did you try to dissuade her from her course of action, Miss Marak?
Of course. We were still friends then. I told Emma plainly that she was being a fool. I said she would live to regret what she was doing.
Yes, and what did she reply?
Why, that she was in love with Petrov, and that was all that mattered. That he had been right about her. Whatever he was, she didn't care.
Did you see Emma Lakeland subsequently, Miss Marak?
Yes. There was one more meeting between us. Towards the end of May, Emma and I met by accident in a cafe. It would have been childish not to talk. Emma looked depressed, very worried. She said things had not been going well for her. She said there was trouble over Petrov. The police had become interested in certain activities of his, and there was a rumor they would make charges. They suspected him of being involved in an alleged hijacking of an aeroplane in Marseille in January. She wanted to do something to help. So she told me that
Yes.
that she had
Yes.
decided... Oh, Emma was extremely upset just then.
Yes, no, please, Miss Marak, just what she told you.
She said she had decided to smuggle Gregori into Britain, to save him from arrest. She said her father would be away through most of June, and therefore it would be possible for her to hide him in her father's house.
I see. How did you respond to this particular confidence?
I couldn't believe she was serious. Truly, I told her at once it would be a very wrong thing to do.
Yes.
Criminal. But honestly, I didn't believe it would ever happen. It seemed to me that she was just talking.
Yes, I see. Thank you, Miss Marak. No further questions.
Mademoiselle Marak, you said that at a stage when you were on good terms with Miss Lakeland, you became aware that she was becoming involved with someone whom you regarded as dangerous.
Yes, sir.
Well, did you do anything about it?
Well, at first I didn't know what to do. We'd finished up our conversation that day. Bad friends, not speaking anymore. But then I thought, no, I must do something to help Emma. So I remembered her father in England and I wrote him a letter.
Ah, and what did you say in the letter?
Just what I have told you here. That his daughter had become involved with a suspected terrorist. And that if he loved her, he should do something to save her.
Now, this would have been when? The end of April?
Yes.
I see. Now, before April, how long had you known Gregori Petrov?
2 years, perhaps?
Oh, sometime, that is, before the advent of Miss Lakeland.
Oh, yes.
And how well had you known Gregori Petrov? Closely? Remotely?
I saw him regularly because of Liberté aux gens humains. Quite closely, I suppose.
Oh, should that not be corrected to very closely, Mademoiselle Marak?
I'm sorry.
The truth is it not, mademoiselle, that up till approximately the end of March this year, you were Gregori Petrov's mistress?
It makes no difference to what I have said. I have spoken the truth.
Have you, mademoiselle? When your affair ended with Petrov last March, you parted from him gladly and freely, did you?
He was an evil man. I had come to realize that.
You experienced no feeling whatever of jealousy towards your successor?
No, I felt sorry for Emma.
Mademoiselle, did Miss Lakeland know you had only recently been rejected by Petrov at the time when she told you she'd become his mistress?
I wasn't rejected. I broke with Gregori because he was no good for me.
The fact is that Miss Lakeland didn't know and therefore confided in you most ill-advisedly.
I can't tell you things like that. You'll have to ask Miss Lakeland.
And the truth is that you hated her for her ignorance and resolved to punish her, just as you were already planning to punish Petrov for his abandonment of you.
No.
And when you met Emma Lakeland in the cafe, she told you not that she was planning to smuggle Petrov out of France, as you tried to pretend to us here, but that Petrov was terrorizing her, treating her with brutality in order to compel her to get him out.
No, that's not true.
And in mid-May or thereabouts, you contacted the French police, informing them of certain facts you'd uncovered which seemed to connect Petrov with an attempted hijacking. Didn't you, mademoiselle?
How do you know these things? I thought no one knew.
You admit the truth of the allegations.
It is true that when I thought I had found certain information about Petrov, I sent it to the police, yes. He deserved that. He had betrayed me. But I sent it anonymously. How did it become known it was me?
Well, I'm asking the questions here, mademoiselle. Was it correct information you sent to the police about Petrov, or a fabrication?
It was true. It showed he had a clear connection with the hijacking in Marseille.
How did you come by this information?
I can't answer that.
Can't? Or don't choose to, Mademoiselle Marak? As well as having been Gregori Petrov's mistress, were you also involved in his alleged activities?
No. Please, this you must believe. I wanted to help Emma, but nothing I did could break up the affair, because she and Gregori were more than lovers. They were collaborators in terrorism. Emma confessed it. When I told her that smuggling Gregori into Britain would be criminal, she laughed at me and said, "What do you think I am now? I love him. I belong to him. So I am the same."
The case of the Queen against Lakeland will be resumed tomorrow in the Crown Court.
What is your religion?
Church of England.
Take the Bible in your right hand and read aloud the words on this card.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
You are Ernest Robert Lakeland, and you live at 3 Bay Approach, Fulchester West.
I am, and that is correct.
What is your occupation?
I'm an investment consultant.
You're related to the accused in this case?
Yes, yes I am. Emma Lakeland is my daughter.
Emma Joan Lakeland is accused of having been concerned in making arrangements for the entry into Great Britain of Gregori Petrov, an alien. Petrov, a suspected terrorist, has been returned to France, where he is to face charges. It's been testified that last April, while in Paris as a student, Emma Lakeland became Gregori Petrov's mistress. After this, it is alleged, she brought him to England and concealed him in her father's house, getting him ashore after a deep-water drop by means of a small boat. The trial continues.
And then, about the beginning of May, May the 3rd, I think it was, a letter arrived from Paris. It informed me that Emma was having an affair with a man named Gregori Petrov.
You knew nothing of any liaison of your daughter's before this?
No, nothing.
Who was the author of that letter, Mr. Lakeland?
Mr. Lotterby, do you have any objections to these questions?
No, my lord. My own cross-examination of the last witness raised the question of the letter. We may as well hear all about it.
Very well, you may answer the question. Who wrote the letter?
A young woman, a fellow student of Emma's at the Sorbonne, Miss Marak, Solange Marak. I wasn't acquainted with her.
What precise effect did this communication have on you, Mr. Lakeland?
Well, naturally enough, it was a hell of a shock. It said that not only had Emma entered into an affair which gave every appearance of being ill-judged and casual, but that into the bargain her lover was some kind of a bad hat, a suspected terrorist involved in hijacking and God knows what.
You've always felt a deep concern for your daughter, have you, Mr. Lakeland?
Well, she's my only child.
Yes.
And her mother died over 5 years ago. It's difficult when the mother's gone. You feel a nagging worry. You also feel vaguely guilty for some reason I've never been quite able to work out.
Yes, I see. Now, what did you do after receiving Miss Mariak's letter?
Well, the only thing I could do, I legged it over to London Airport and the next plane to Paris.
You arrived in Paris when?
On May the 4th. My plan was to go straight to Emma and plead with her to come back home and reflect. If she'd been younger, I suppose I could have bunged her off to a Swiss convent, but in the event, that wasn't on.
And did you, in fact, see your daughter and ask her to come home?
Oh, yes. Yes, I did that right enough.
With what result, Mr. Lakeland?
Well, there was one hell of a blazing row. Emma didn't exactly appreciate what she called my interference. So there was some good ripe stuff from Emma about how it was her life and she'd decide what she would do with it. And who did I think I was anyway? You know the sort of thing. I, for my part, stuck to the purely practical line. I pointed out that from what I could hear, Petrov seemed the kind of character who would end up in trouble with the law. Now, did Emma really want that kind of entanglement?
And what did she reply to that?
Simply that it was not relevant, that she was deeply in love with Petrov and she would do anything in the world for him, if necessary, even things that other people considered illegal.
Now, she used just those words, did she? Would do anything in the world for him? Even things which other people would consider illegal?
As far as I can remember.
Yes, I see. Now, what did you do next, Mr. Lakeland?
Well, there wasn't much I could do after that. I came back home to England and brooded a bit, and then, towards the end of May...
Yes, Mr. Lakeland?
Well, I've never been in the habit of prying so far as Emma is concerned, but you must understand that by now I was becoming desperately worried about her.
Yes.
Well, at the end of April, she'd sent some things back from Paris, clothes, books, notes. I suddenly got the idea that I should go through this stuff to see if there was anything I should know about. There was. In amongst some clothes, I found a special folder of papers, specifications, I suppose you'd call them, plans of embassies, consulates all over the world, details of airports, security arrangements, terrorist data. I burned all that stuff. I got it out of my sight.
Did you in June have cause to go away yourself?
Oh, yes. It's the time of year when I usually go to the States to check on various interests there. I wrote to Emma, saying that I'd be away as usual and suggesting she might like to use the house in my absence to be alone, think things over, that sort of rubbish.
And you left the house vacant?
Yes.
Did you, in fact, go to the States?
No, I went to London. I checked into a hotel.
Now, why did you do that?
Well, before I left Paris, I'd alerted a chap I know in the French press to Petrov. and asked him to let me know if he ever heard anything about the man. Well, on May the 27th, he got in touch with me. He informed me that the French police were about to prefer charges against Petrov, who'd need to leave the country if he was going to avoid arrest. Well, bearing in mind the invitation that I had sent to Emma, it seemed quite likely that the two of them might come to England, the empty house.
Yes, I see. Please carry on.
Right. Oh, yes. Before I went to London, I'd briefed a local gardener, Tom Brain, to keep an eye on the house and let me know what occurred. Well, Tom called me on June the 2nd. Emma was back. He'd seen movement about the house and the boat out in the bay the previous evening. He'd also seen the local grocery making a big delivery. So I returned from London and checked on the grocery. Emma had ordered much more than she would need if she were simply on her own. She'd also asked for French cigarettes.
What's remarkable about that, Mr. Lakeland?
Well, Emma doesn't smoke.
No. What happened next?
Well, I telephoned the police.
Yes, just a minute. Mr. Lakeland, what was the date and time of your telephone call?
June the 4th, my lord, at about, it would be about 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yes, well, that sounds very much like the anonymous telephone call received by Detective Inspector Mortlock of Fulchester CID at that time.
Yes, no doubt it is. I didn't give my name, that's true.
Why not, Mr. Lakeland?
Well, I thought it might seem a bit odd, me informing on Emma. Her father, I mean.
Yes. Yes, I see. Yes, Mr. Harvester.
I have no further questions. Thank you, Mr. Lakeland.
Well, Mr. Lakeland, I suppose it's stating the obvious to say it looks very much as though you set your daughter up for the charges she's facing in this court today.
I beg your pardon?
Why, Mr. Lakeland, did you as good as invite your daughter to bring Gregori Petrov to your house?
Look, that is precisely what I did not do. But after that call from Paris, it suddenly became quite clear to me what Emma would do in the circumstances, and so I let nature take its course.
Hoping that it might end in your daughter's arrest?
No. What on earth can you mean by that?
The Swiss convent being out of the question, I suppose you consider jail a reasonable alternative.
My lord, do I have to put up with this sort of question?
Did you know anything about Gregori Petrov as a person, Mr. Lakeland?
Well, not at first hand, obviously.
Did you make any effort to find out?
Look, what are you trying to make me say?
You seem to have accepted that he was a terrorist very readily, Mr. Lakeland. It didn't occur to you as a consequence that he might be terrorizing your daughter?
Well, Emma seemed perfectly assured when I met her in Paris. I'm certain she would have spoken out if it hadn't been so, and Petrov wasn't about. She told me she loved him.
Oh, didn't it occur to you, Mr. Lakeland, that relationships can change? The fascination of love give way to something else.
Look, there were those papers that I found amongst her things. They showed Emma was in the terrorist business herself.
Oh, so you concluded, Mr. Lakeland, that it was those papers which led you to give your daughter away to the police, was it?
Well, yes. If she were turning crooked, then she needed to be given a sharp lesson before it was too late.
So your motive was to punish your daughter, Mr. Lakeland. I see. Now, you examined those papers of Emma's very carefully before destroying them, did you?
Well, carefully enough. A glance was plenty to tell me what they were.
You're certain the papers were what you say they were, not just notes?
Notes? What kind of notes?
Students' notes. Your daughter is a student, isn't she? A student of political philosophy? She must investigate all sorts of theories, Mr. Lakeland, however outrageous.
Now, see here. I'm not a complete fool. Why do you think I burnt those wretched papers if it weren't that I could see quite clearly that they were damning evidence? Yes, I may have wanted to get Emma into a certain amount of trouble, but not that much.
No, just enough to indicate to her that she'd been a bad girl in your eyes, an undutiful daughter. Emma's really been something of a disappointment to you, hasn't she, Mr.
Well,
Lakeland?
that's ridiculous. What are you talking about?
Hardly the acceptable daughter who sought the white wedding and the country club reception and so forth. All the sort of things you would have so much have liked for her. Rather ran off to Paris, lived with a man of dubious reputation in unsanctified union.
That has nothing to do with the case.
Hasn't it, Mr. Lakeland?
Well, of course not. Why should it? Emma's behavior is her own affair. I've never interfered.
You'd like to have done, though, wouldn't you? As long as it couldn't be seen to be interference.
Oh, what's that supposed to mean?
Oh, come, Mr. Lakeland. You thought your daughter's action immoral, didn't you?
I resent you trying
Calling
to...
for correction and chastisement by whatever means they might be administered.
It is difficult. It's damn difficult, you know, when the mother's dead. I suppose the one thing I couldn't stand was Emma moving in with someone else. You know what I mean. Especially a character like Petrov. I couldn't stand that. Not at all. I had to put a stop to that.
The defence will be calling 2 witnesses apart from the defendant, but at this point I'd like to make it clear to your lordship that there may be certain difficulties concerning the attendance of one of the witnesses.
Yes, well, isn't that a matter that can be solved with a short adjournment when the moment arises?
Well, I think not, my lord. The witness is Gregori Petrov. Repeated applications have been made to the French police to allow him to appear, but because of the nature of the charges against him, they appear reluctant to allow him to leave the country.
Yes, no doubt that is to be expected. Will he ever be available?
I can only hope, my lord.
Well, let's get on.
Thank you, my lord. I call the defendant Emma Lakeland.
What is your religion?
I wish to affirm.
Please raise your right hand and read aloud the words on this card.
I do solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
You are Emma Joan Lakeland of 3 Bay Approach, Fulchester West.
I am, yes.
On June the 4th last, you were at your home address.
I was. I just returned from Paris. I'm a student. I came back on June the 1st.
Now, will you please tell the court of something that happened at about 4:30 p.m. on June the 4th?
Oh, yes. Well, the door sounded, and when I went and opened it, it was the police. They showed me a warrant they had and demanded to enter and search.
Did they say what they were searching for?
They did, yes. A man called Gregori Petrov.
And was this man, Gregori Petrov, in the house at the time? Miss Lakeland?
He was, yes. He was upstairs, in a loft above the upstairs hall.
And did you inform the police of this fact?
No. No, what I said was that there was no such man in the house. I said they had no right to do what they were doing.
Now, why did you tell them that? Well, let's approach the matter from another angle. What is your connection with this man, Petrov?
You must answer, you know.
Yes, of course, I'm sorry. In Paris, Gregori Petrov had been my lover.
Had been?
Yes.
Are you telling us then that at the time of which we speak, early June, Gregori Petrov was no longer your lover?
He wasn't, not anymore. I tried to break with him.
Tell us about that, please.
Well, I'd taken up with Gregori in April. It hadn't been a sudden thing. We'd known each other over a period of time because we belonged to the same discussion group, Liberté aux gens humains.
What was your interest in this group?
Oh, purely academic. Political philosophy is one of my subjects, and it's important to keep up with the new ideas. Well, everything was discussed at Liberté aux gens humains. Everything.
Please go on.
Gregori was good-looking. a bit overwhelming, really. An exotic character. He claimed to be Russian, though I'm not sure that's what he really was. I fell in love with him. Later, when friends warned me he was mixed up with terrorists, when even my father came over to Paris to see me and try and get it through my head I was being a fool, I'd got to the stage where I could only bluff things out. You see, whatever Gregori was, I was sticking to him. It was imperative. I loved him.
Did you say to your father that you could even do something illegal to aid Petrov if necessary?
Yes, I seem to remember I did. It shows what a terrible state I was in. But then, of course, later I realized how wrong I'd been.
Later?
About mid-May or so, Gregori Petrov began to behave towards me in a different fashion. Up until then, he'd always been very kind. But he began to be domineering with me. Violent.
Physically violent?
Yes. He hit me frequently. He seemed to want to control my whole life.
Was this a situation from which you tried to escape?
Well, it's not as simple as that. When someone you thought loved you turns on you like that, well, you panic inside. You feel paralyzed. You can't do anything to help yourself. I thought he might even try and kill me. Anyway, one day late in May, Gregori told me he was in trouble with the police and had to get out of France. He'd seen that letter that my father had sent me saying our house in England would be empty, and so Gregori said we should go there.
Now, what was your reaction to that?
Well, I knew enough to guess that Gregori couldn't probably hope to get into Britain legally, so what he was actually proposing was that I smuggle him in somehow. I summoned up all my courage and made a run for it.
How exactly?
Not very professionally, simply by waiting till the middle of the night and then bolting for the airport. Well, my father wasn't there when I got to our house. I was alone. But the very next day, after I'd gone out in the boat...
Yes, Miss Lakeland?
Well, Gregori was there when I got back to the house. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't even imagine how he got into the country. But there he was, as threatening as ever, insisting that I hide him and saying now that he'd kill me if I didn't do all he wanted.
Now, Miss Lakeland, it's been testified that when in fact the police discovered Gregori Petrov in the loft, you said, "It's wicked to separate us. You're evil men. I've been through too much for him."
Yes, I may well have said something like that.
You can't remember exactly?
I remember the words, using them. I also remember calling the police filthy fascist pigs or something. What I can't remember is the state of mind all that came out of. You see, I seem to have had some sort of psychological reversal. I resented the police when they came. Resented them. It's hard to explain.
Now, it's also been testified by your father that among your effects at Three Bay Approach was a quantity of what he describes as terrorist data. Now, what do you have to say about that?
I heard my father say this a little while ago, but I don't know what he's talking about. All I'd ever sent back from Paris in that line were notes.
Notes?
Yes, notes of lectures, research, that sort of thing. I can't remember them in detail. I suppose particular sections may have had to do with terrorist data generally. I have certainly done some research on the organisation of paramilitary groups. But what on earth my father could find that make him think I was directly involved with that sort of thing, I don't know.
Thank you, Miss Lakeland.
So, Miss Lakeland, those papers which so shocked your father were just notes, were they?
Yes. I repeat, I can't exactly remember what was in them, but my father seems to have got quite the wrong idea.
Then, happily for you, burned the lot.
I don't know what you mean by happily.
Were any of those notes, by any chance, material gleaned from meetings of the political discussion group Liberté aux gens humains, Miss Lakeland?
Well, they may have been, yes, it's quite likely.
Is it not a fact, Miss Lakeland, that Liberté aux gens humains is merely a front for an international terrorist organization with which you've been actively connected for some time and of which you're now a committed member?
What did you say?
Well, that was a clear enough question. I'd appreciate a straightforward answer, and I remind you that you've taken your oath to tell the truth.
It's nonsense. I'm nothing to do with any terrorist organization. I know nothing about Liberté aux gens humains except that it's a political discussion group.
That is the truth, and you swear to it?
Yes. Yes.
And you insist, do you, despite all evidence to the contrary, that Gregori Petrov terrorized you and reduced you to his unwilling slave. That's also the truth, and you swear to it?
Well, I don't know what you mean by evidence to the contrary. There hasn't been any. Well, not properly. My father saw me in Paris before the crisis with Gregori arose. And Solange Marak lied about me. I should think that was obvious now.
If you were being terrorized, why didn't you go to the Paris police?
As a matter of fact, I did, but they didn't prove very helpful.
Oh? Who did you see?
I can't remember his name. It was an inspector.
An inspector, whose name you can't remember. Oh, come now, Miss Lakeland. Isn't this all fabrication? You didn't say a word about this when you were arrested.
It's the truth.
Miss Marak has stated, quite plainly, that you told her you intended to smuggle Gregori Petrov into Britain.
Miss Marak is motivated.
Well,
Any
then,
fool could see that.
On the 1st of June, after you'd gone home to your father's conveniently empty house, you just happened to go out in the boat on the very night that Gregori Petrov miraculously arrived in Britain, correct?
Yes. Now, you may not like that, but that's the way it was.
How did Petrov get into Britain?
Well, how should I know?
Why did you go out in the boat?
Because I wanted to.
For the fresh air?
Yes.
And that piece of material from Gregori Petrov's clothing, afterwards found in the boat, what about that?
Well, I can't explain that.
Oh.
I don't see why I should have to. As Mr. Lotterby said, perhaps Gregori went down to examine the boat while he was at the house. Look, I was too terrified to know what was happening.
Apparently, Miss Lakeland. Too terrified even to know when you could make a bid for liberty.
What do you mean?
Gregori Petrov was forcing you to do what he wanted, you've said. But if he went to examine the boat whilst at the house, he was either circumspect enough to take you with him, in which case you'd remember it, or else he left you alone. In which case, if you'd been only half as frightened as you make out, you'd have run like a hare. Well, Miss Lakeland, interesting alternatives. Which do you choose?
The case of the Queen against Lakeland will be resumed tomorrow in the Crown Court.
You've said Gregori Petrov was holding you a prisoner in your own house, Miss Lakeland. But if he left the house to examine the boat, he was either circumspect enough to take you with him, in which case you'd remember it, or else he left you alone, in which case, if you'd been only half as frightened as you make out, you'd have run like a hare. Well, Miss Lakeland, interesting alternatives. Which do you choose?
Emma Joan Lakeland is accused of having made arrangements for the illegal entry into Britain of an alien, Gregori Petrov. Petrov is a suspected terrorist and is currently facing charges in France arising from this. It's been testified that while in Paris as a student, Miss Lakeland was for a time Gregori Petrov's mistress. Despite the fact that her father has told of papers found in their house which appeared to him to link his daughter with terrorist activities, Miss Lakeland has denied any such link and insisted that Petrov came to Britain by his own means, subsequently forcing her to hide him. The trial continues.
Well, Miss Lakeland, will you answer, please?
I don't know what you want me to say. I can't answer. Well, Gregori must have gone down to examine the boat without my realizing it. Well, I know it sounds absurd, but I was in a bad way through that whole time.
Come now, Miss Lakeland, you still insist that your captor left you alone while he examined the boat, and yet you took no advantage of it.
Look, you don't know how it was. I was in a terrible state of mind.
And Petrov knew this and banked on it?
How do you mean?
Well, whatever state you were in, Miss Lakeland, would Gregori Petrov really have been so foolish as to go and inspect a boat at the bottom of the garden while you were left to your own devices up in the house? You seriously ask this court to believe that?
I can't explain anything. I can't.
No, well, the truth, Miss Lakeland, is that you picked up Petrov from further out at sea on June the 1st, conscientiously smuggled him ashore, and might arguably have been caring for him up in that loft to this day, had not your father blown the whistle on you.
No. It's ridiculous. You're talking nonsense.
Yes? Well, the jury will decide that, Miss Lakeland. No further questions.
Does your lordship have any questions?
No. You may return to the dock.
I call Inspector Raoul Clemore of the Paris Sûreté.
And therefore, in late May, due to the fact that we had begun to keep a watch on Gregori Petrov, we became aware of Miss Lakeland. We perceived she was living with him.
I see. And did you later have a conversation with Miss Lakeland, Inspector?
Yes, on the 29th of May, she came to our central office at the Ile du Cité to ask for police protection.
Miss Lakeland called at your office asking for police protection.
Yes, she spoke of her love affair with Petrov. It was becoming difficult for her. She wished to end it. But she was afraid to do so because this would make Petrov angry at her, and then he would surely cause her harm.
Mm-hmm. Did you personally interview Miss Lakeland, Inspector?
Yes. You must understand that we were checking out certain information that had been supplied to us about Petrov. And here was Miss Lakeland wishing to get away from him, so I questioned her very closely.
Mm-hmm. Now, what state of mind would you have said Miss Lakeland was in when she spoke to you on May the 29th, Inspector?
Upset, yes. Nervous.
Afraid?
Very much so, I think.
Thank you, Inspector. Will you wait there?
What did you question Miss Lakeland closely about, Inspector?
Her fear, the reasons for it, how well she knew Petrov.
Did she reveal a wide knowledge of Petrov's activities?
No, this was strange. She hardly seemed to know the man at all, in fact. I felt very sorry for her. Here was a young woman who was evidently mixed up with a man she did not understand.
Did you comply with Miss Lakeland's request for protection, Inspector?
Well, how could we? There was no true justification. I explained to Miss Lakeland, however, that my men were watching Petrov, and if she wished to leave him and return to her home in England, I would see to it that she got to the airport safely. And this, in fact, happened. Late on the 31st of May, Miss Lakeland made her way to Orly Airport, and one of my men reported she caught the 2 a.m. plane for London. The very next day, we found ourselves in a position to lay charges against Petrov, but by that time, he had left Paris also.
Yeah. Now, have you considered the possibility that Miss Lakeland was deliberately deceiving you, Inspector?
I'm sorry?
In her complaint to you of Gregori Petrov, did she ever happen to say that he'd hit her at any time?
No, she said nothing of this.
No. Nor that he was demanding that she should smuggle him out of France and into Britain?
No.
Oh, that's astounding. Since, you see, she herself has told this court that towards the end of May he was doing both those things. Excellent reasons for persuading the police to give protection, wouldn't you have said?
Perhaps, but she was terrified of Petrov. To have said too much might have caused reprisals.
Or might have compelled the police to intervene, which is precisely what she didn't want, Inspector. Miss Lakeland could simply have been seeking an alibi, couldn't she?
Alibi? Alibi for what purpose?
To make her appear the innocent victim, if by some ill chance she should be apprehended after smuggling Petrov into Britain. To persuade others that she was forced into behaving as she did.
This is hardly possible. She must have known that by not giving the police detailed evidence of Petrov's mistreatment of her. She was merely creating an alibi which would later be destroyed.
Beggars can't be choosers, Inspector.
Come on.
Miss Lakeland needed some indication that she was under pressure. That was all. Thank you, Inspector. No further questions.
Yes. Inspector, do you know anything about a political discussion group in Paris called Liberté aux gens humains?
Yes, this group is well known to us at the Sûreté. We have investigated it.
Why, please?
Mainly because Petrov was a member.
Did you know that the accused, Emma Lakeland, was also a member?
Yes, we concluded this was because of Petrov.
Yes, I see. Now, you say that you investigated Liberté aux gens humains. What did you discover?
Well, we had thought for a time that it might have been a front for certain terrorist activities, but it seemed to be what it said, a political discussion group.
I see. Any re-examination?
No, my lord.
All stand.
Well, now, Mr. Lotterby, I don't think I'm justified in granting you any further adjournment in the matter of your missing witness.
The matter is now resolved, my lord. The witness is here.
Ah.
The French authorities have, however, made it a condition of his appearance that they be allowed to keep the strictest surveillance at all times.
Oh, I dare say we'll be able to manage that all right, Mr. Lotterby.
I'm obliged, my lord. I call Gregori Petrov.
Gregori Petrov, please.
Your name is Gregori Petrov, and you are currently resident in Paris?
Please, I'm just now being held by police in Paris. There are charges against me, they are false.
Yes, one moment, Mr. Lotterby. Mr. Petrov, I think we'd better get it clear from the outset that your business in this court is simply to answer any questions which may be put to you and not to indulge in comment of any kind. And since the sun is not shining brightly in here today, perhaps you will remove the dark glasses.
But I have trouble with my eyes, monsieur. It hurts not to wear glasses.
Oh, take them off! Now, your name is Gregori Petrov. You affirm that, do you?
I am Gregori Petrov.
And what is your nationality?
I am Russian, but I live in different places.
That is the whole truth. I hope I don't need to remind you that you are on oath.
I am Gregori Petrov. I ought to know if I am Russian. There are people who sometimes say I am something else. Well, let them prove it.
Yes, Mr. Lotterby.
Mr. Petrov, you are acquainted with the defendant in this case, Emma Lakeland?
Emma? Yes, I know Emma. We met when she came to Paris to study. By last April, we were close.
What do you mean by close, Mr. Petrov?
We were lovers.
Did you feel a genuine love for Miss Lakeland, or was it for you merely a casual affair? Mr. Petrov?
What kind of love does Emma say it was?
I'm not asking Emma, Mr. Petrov. I'm asking you.
Look, all my life, there's been plenty of women. Some of them I cannot even remember their names.
Oh, my lord, are we to be subjected to a chronicle of this witness's amours?
But with Emma, it was different. Oh, oui, je comprends. You don't believe this, huh? You say, Petrov, he's too hard. He doesn't know how to feel things. Well, I tell you now, it was love with Emma. Love. And I come here today to say this, also to say what a great fool I was to throw it away.
Throw it away?
Yes.
What do you mean by that, Mr. Petrov?
I made mistakes. I became bad towards Emma. I started to hurt her.
Hurt her physically, you mean?
Yes.
Why, Mr. Petrov?
Look, I am a violent man. All my life. In Russia, they arrested me and sent me to a camp. I had to break out of it. Then in Paris, last May, someone began to say bad things about me.
What do you mean, bad things?
Untrue things. Someone who hated me began to say I was mixed up with some criminals in the south of France. Then I heard the police were going to come for me. So it was like Russia all over again. I told Emma she had to help me. Her father was going to be away from their house in England, so I said she should get me into England and hide me there.
You demanded of Miss Lakeland that she should get you into Britain illegally.
I was afraid about the police. And then when she said no, she wouldn't help me, I began to hit her.
To force her to do what you wanted?
Yes.
And did she do what you wanted?
No. No, Emma just waited. Then one night when I was asleep, ran away. So now I knew the police would come, so what was I to do? Emma had no place to go except her father's house, so I thought I would follow her there and make her hide me.
Which you did?
Yes.
How did you get into Britain, Mr. Petro?
There are ways. A fisherman on the French coast. I arrived in England. Emma wasn't in the house. She was out sailing in her boat that night, so I just waited till she got back. She was so frightened to see me. She cried with fear. So, she did everything I said after that, right up till the English police came.
Miss Lakeland was terrified of you, did all you asked out of fear.
I said I would kill her if she didn't help me.
Now, Mr. Petrov, you mentioned a boat Emma Lakeland used the night you arrived in Britain. Did you at any time go out in that boat?
No, why should I do that?
Did you ever go on board the boat?
I had a look at the boat, sure. I thought perhaps I might need it to get away if things went wrong.
Did you find it necessary to keep Miss Lakeland under the strictest surveillance the whole time you were in the house? Or did you ever let her out of your sight?
No. Look, you don't know how frightened she was to see me again. She began to act like someone in a dream. I feel bad about this now.
Is that why you've come here today, to give evidence, because you feel bad about your conduct?
Yeah, Emma shouldn't suffer. She only did what she did because I made her.
Thank you, Mr. Petrov. That's all.
So, Mr. Petrov, nobility beneath the boorishness.
What?
The far, far better thing that you do. Englishmen shown the way by a high-minded Russian. Dickens shaking hands with Dostoevsky.
Mr. Harvester, if you mean to indulge in literary allusions, perhaps you would make sure, first, that they are meaningful to the witness and to the jury, and for that matter to me.
I apologize, my lord. So, Mr. Petrov, it was all just as you've told us, was it? You behaved like a soulless bully towards Miss Lakeland, and she became as putty in your hands.
I hit her. I'm sorry for this.
You terrorized her?
Yes.
So that in Paris she finally ran away from you?
Yes.
Escaping with remarkably little difficulty, one might note in passing. Then you followed her?
I already said this.
By the simple expedient of chatting up a French fisherman and popping across the channel to Miss Lakeland's British home, where the terrorization continued, as per schedule.
Why you say it like this, huh? You want to make it sound stupid, eh?
Convince me it isn't.
I came to England after Emma to make her hide me.
Where did you land in England when the fisherman brought you, Mr. Petro?
Where? I don't know. When I told him of the place where Emma's house was, he said he could land me somewhere near there.
After which, what did you do? Just strolled up the foreshore and inquired after the next bus for Fulchester West?
Oh, mais vous moquez de moi, non?
Throughout your stay, Miss Lakeland was so paralyzed with fear that you didn't even have to keep an eye on her. You just leave her to her own devices, confident that she wouldn't even call the police.
Mais écoutez-moi! I tell you just the way it was. Now, why would I do this if it is not the truth? It's not such a good story. I could make up a better one.
Well, I give you credit for some subtlety. You're not a fool. Even less, of course, are you the guilty lover that you're pretending to be at the moment. Let's reconstruct the scenario a little more plausibly, shall we? First of all, you didn't beat up and terrorize Miss Lakeland in Paris, did you? When the two of you feared arrest, she simply went to the police to pretend as much and then proceeded home.
This is wrong.
You, meantime, had arranged for someone on the French coast to pick you up, to take you out to sea on May the 31st and drop you at a prearranged point where Miss Lakeland was to pick you up.
Je veux pas
Thus, in the event the two of you were enjoying privacy and rest at Miss Lakeland's house, and when, unfortunately, her father intervened and ruined the idyll. Most inconsiderate.
Attendez. Now, this time, you hear what I say. Why would I come here to tell lies, eh? You answer that. I don't need to come here.
Oh, but you do, Mr. Petrov. Oh, yes, indeed. Since it's become clear to you that you may soon be going to prison, and for a considerable period, it's essential to you that Miss Lakeland remain at liberty.
Why? Why you say that?
Because someone must carry on your work, obviously. The work that you've devoted your life to, terrorist agitation. It's true, isn't it, Mr. Petrov? You are a terrorist, an international coordinator, and Miss Lakeland has become your first lieutenant.
I will say only one more thing here. I fear to go to prison. Fear it. Because of Russia, I am more afraid of this than anything else in the world. Entendu? And I would do anything to stop this. And that is why I urged Emma to make her afraid, so that she will hide me and I will not have to go to prison. But now the lies will send me there. So I hurt Emma for nothing.
I have no further questions for this witness, my lord.
Any re-examination?
No, my lord.
You may leave the witness box.
That concludes the case for the defense, my lord.
Yes.
Members of the jury, Miss Lakeland has insisted, and Gregori Petrov has confirmed, that she was terrorized into behaving as she did at all times. But what proof do we have of this apart from their joint and equally motivated testimony? Miss Lakeland's father knew nothing of her terrorization when he saw her in early May, nor did Miss Marak, who saw her a month later. And even when Miss Lakeland went to the Paris police, she complained not of actual violence towards her, but only of the fear of it. Secondly, a scrap of material from Gregori Petrov's clothing was found in the family boat, which Miss Lakeland was seen to have used over a 2-hour period on June the 1st. Now, Miss Lakeland and Petrov, jointly again, have suggested that this scrap of material got in the boat while Petrov was examining it, the while leaving the terrorized Miss Lakeland alone in the house, where she didn't even have the presence of mind to call the police. Well, need I comment? The accused and her lover are two very dangerous and ruthless people who are mocking justice to fulfill their mysterious but undoubtedly evil ends. Members of the jury, in my submission, the evidence here is overwhelming, and you must find Emma Lakeland guilty as charged.
My lord, members of the jury, let us examine the prosecution's evidence. Now, firstly, this scrap of material found in the Lakeland's boat. Now, can we seriously accept this as proof that the boat had been used to smuggle Gregori Petrov into Britain? Isn't it equally likely, indeed more likely, that Petrov, as he has said, merely examined the boat to see if it would be useful for a getaway? And then, can we seriously accept the biased evidence of the two main witnesses for the prosecution? The father, who so obviously misunderstands his daughter, who is admitted wanting to punish her, and the friend, Mademoiselle Marak, who was discarded by her lover in favor of the defendant, and who has shown such capacity for revenge. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it would seem to me self-evident that Gregori Petrov terrorized Miss Lakeland. We have heard from Inspector Clemore of the Paris Sûreté that Miss Lakeland had asked for police protection. So frightened had she become of her former lover, and Petrov himself has admitted that he threatened he would kill her. Members of the jury, I submit that Gregori Petrov turned up unannounced and uninvited at my client's home, and Emma Lakeland, in terror of her life, was forced to give him shelter. I ask you to find her not guilty.
Members of the jury, Gregori Petrov certainly arrived in this country illegally. So, have the prosecution proved to your entire satisfaction that the defendant, Emma Lakeland, is guilty of the charge of assisting Petrov to arrive in this country illegally. So, had she made preparations for his arrival, or had she, as the defense suggests, been surprised by his arrival and then kept an unwilling prisoner in her own house? Does the police evidence of the motorboat and the torn shirt mean that Petrov arrived illegally in that boat with Miss Lakeland, or, as Petrov himself insists, that he made a subsequent inspection of that boat? Now remember, the accused is not charged with concealing Petrov in her father's house. She is not charged with terrorist activities. But these matters are relevant because of the assertion that a person who sympathizes with an alleged terrorist is more likely to assist him than one who does not. But do not allow any suspicions that the accused, who was concerned with terrorist activities, to influence you. Firstly, because there is no evidence that she ever did anything but talk. And secondly, because these matters are not relevant to the charge, which is assisting Petrov to enter this country illegally. Will you now please retire and consider your verdict?
Members of the jury, will your foreman please stand? Just answer this question, yes or no. Have you reached a verdict upon which you are all agreed?
Yes.
Do you find the defendant, Emma Lakeland, guilty or not guilty on the charge of assisting the illegal entry into the United Kingdom of Gregori Petrov?
Guilty.
Is that the verdict of you all?
Yes.
Emma Lakeland was sentenced to 6 months imprisonment and fined £400. Join us again on our cameras to return to bring you another leading case from the Crown Court.